Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back for another cook video. Today we are going to be doing another pulled pork video, but it's going to be slightly more traditional than the last one, but also with a little bit of an upgrade in my opinion. The first thing that we're going to do with this pork butt is we're actually going to debone this pork butt. Now, if you guys have cooked a pork butt before, you know that blade bone inside that pork shoulder is a little bit tricky. It has a lot of curves to it. My recommendation is to make sure that you get yourselves a nice boning knife or a filleting knife. Chef's knife is a little bit more tricky with this one just because there's some tight corners around it. Just kind of take the tip of the knife and just start scraping against the bone. Try not to make any ginormous gashes in it and just kind of open it up with your hands as you try to make more and more cuts as you go. Now that we got this pork shoulder boned out, we're going to cut this into smaller, more manageable chunks. Now, you might be asking, why are we destroying this pork shoulder and not just seasoning up and putting it on the grill right now? Because if I were to ask you guys, what's one of the best parts about pulled pork? I think most people would say it's the bark on the outside. But in reality, the traditional way of cooking and seasoning a pulled pork is like the worst way to get the most amount of bark. But we have to be careful here because we want to make sure that we have a good amount of surface area so we can get as much seasoning as possible. But we can't cut them up into tiny, tiny pieces or else everything is just going to dry out and not really allow us to be able to make it into pulled pork. To get my point across, I made this graph about comparing tenderness to barkiness of our pulled pork. If we maximize our levels of tenderness, then we lose in our barkiness or our seasoning on the outside. But if we go too far in the barkiness and we cut them to smaller and smaller chunks so we can get more bark, then we lose tenderness because all of our pieces will most likely dry out. So what we're trying to do with this method is to find a perfect balance of tenderness and barkiness based off of how we cut this up into medium-sized chunks that allows us to get a lot of surface area, but big enough that we can still cook it and have it be really soft in the center. Now that we got our pulled pork cut up into manageable chunks, we're going to start seasoning it up. I'm going to start it off with the base with just kosher salt and black pepper. And then I'm going to finish it up with another layer of Carolina Dirt barbecue rub from Lily's Q. Now that we got our pulled pork all seasoned up, let's get our fire going so we can get this thing started. So as we wait for our pork shoulder to finish cooking, we're going to do something a little extra. Just because this is YouTube and we always have to go the extra mile to get extra views, which is a reminder to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends, we're going to finish these pulled pork chunks by cooking it inside of some lard. And to go the extra mile, I went to my local butcher shop, Forza Meats. Shout out to Forza for giving me this 4 pounds of leaf lard. Some of you guys might be asking, what is leaf lard or leaf fat? This is the fat that's connected to the organs. This fat is known as the cleanest fat inside the animal, and it almost looks like a sheet. Even just have pulled it out of the fridge, even though I have to pull it apart a little bit to separate it, but the fat itself is pretty soft. All we're going to do is cut into smaller chunks so it's easy for it to render. I was originally going to put this through a meat grinder, but I was a little bit worried about it getting gummed up because the fat is so soft. If you guys want to do that, you're more than welcome to, but cutting up in chunks like this I think works perfectly fine as well. So once I got all these chunks in this uniform shape like this, we're going to throw all the chunks inside of a Dutch oven, pour a little bit of water in there just so it doesn't stick at the bottom, and then we're going to be throwing in the oven at 200 to 250 or so for the next couple of hours. And then let it cool down and you'll have leaf lard that looks something like this. After about 7 hours at 300-ish degrees or so, the internal temps on these chunks right now are roughly about 175 to 180. The main thing that we want to do at this point is to make sure that we get good color and good bark development on the outside. The next thing that we're going to do is put some of that lard that we had just rendered down into this pan. Similar to how Leroy and Lewis cooks their beef cheeks and beef tallow, we're doing the same thing with lard. We're not really confit these, we're not going to cover the entire thing with fat. We just want to add a little bit of fat and a little bit of moisture as we go about finishing this pulled pork. We're going to wrap the top with foil, and then it's going to go back in the smoker at 300 degrees for about another hour to an hour and a half until our pork is nice and tender. To accompany this pulled pork, we're going to be making a slaw. I don't like going to a grocery store and buying just red cabbage and shredded carrots just for the slaw. Usually when I do that, I end up throwing a lot of it away, and I also have these random ingredients of things that I don't really have use for other than this one time. So I'm going to show you guys a slaw that I made at home based off of what I have, and I challenge you guys to do the same. We're going to really quickly chop this cabbage into ribbons. Then I'm going to salt this cabbage and let it sit for a little bit to draw out some extra moisture. With the dressing, I'm keeping it really simple. We're adding some Kewpie mayo, some sour cream. I'm using an aged cherry vinegar, but whatever vinegar you have at home would be perfectly fine. Some salt, pepper, sugar, and a little bit of lemon juice. When we're ready to mix, I'm going to put some cabbage in the bowl. I'm going to drizzle the dressing on the sides of the bowl so I don't overdress it and make my slaw soggy. And since I don't have red cabbage and shredded carrots, I'm going to be adding some green onions and some parsley to my coleslaw. After about an hour and a half to 2 hours or so, our pulled pork is done. And the one thing that I like about this method is that, one, you're able to get a lot of extra bark, and two, you get a little bit more smoke on your meat. A lot of people tell me that they feel like their brisket, their pulled pork, and everything that they make doesn't taste quite as smoky as they would like to. This method will make sure that you get a little more smoke than you usually do. You can see how tender it is and it breaks. After we have it all mixed up, take a look at how much extra bark we have inside this entire mound of pulled pork. But I don't think there's any doubt that this method gives you a little bit more of that flavor that you're looking for. Now that we got all of our components ready to go, let's make a sandwich. Alright guys, let's give this sandwich a try. Two things I noticed right away. Number one, the smokiness. And number two, the texture. So much more texture than you would typically get. I was a little bit worried initially about over seasoning it and having it be too salty and things like that, but I think it turned out great. And the combination of this rub and this sauce is really good. I enjoy this one a lot. I would consider both of these two kind of like an all-purpose rub and an all-purpose sauce. Very nice. And lastly, let's just talk about that slaw. Adding the lemon juice was really key. I really like that fresh pop that you get from the lemon juice rather than just continuously adding more vinegar to it. But having that scallion or the green onion, whatever you want to call it, with the parsley in there, it allows you to find these little pockets of like freshness and brightness that, you know, even the slaw is kind of there for that purpose also. But I think that parsley at the end there kind of brings everything up, especially with everything being really, really heavy on the sandwich with the pork and having us cook it in the lard and then covering it up with a sweet barbecue sauce. I think it's really nice. If you're looking to add a little more bark and smoke to your pulled pork, this is how to do it. That's going to be it for us today on this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to continue to learn, to grow in your barbecue journey, I'm going to leave these two videos up for you that I think will help you out. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share this video with your friends, and I'll see you guys in the next one.